Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. This is May 2nd. Tonight we're starting the meeting with the hearing for the budget. So we have someone in the audience, and so if you'd like to... Oh, you had nothing you wanted to say? Okay. All right. Then, Patrick, you can put it on hold until somebody comes, and if somebody comes, then... Okay. Good evening. We'll start again. We didn't have anybody come to speak at the budget hearing, so we're going to start the regular portion of the meeting. And I am going to take something out of order because somebody who wanted to speak at the public comment needs to go quickly. So I'll just open up. Do you have much in the way of highlights, like 5 minutes?
You can. I can wait if you want to.
Jackie, do you want to go now, or
highlights and then public
or do you want to have?
That's fine.
Okay.
We can always reconsider.
Okay.
I'm Jacqueline Weitzman, 26 Elm Place, and I am speaking tonight as both the co-president of the Hastings PTSA.
Jackie, can you just move that mic over so people can hear you?
Yes.
Great.
As well as a member of the Hastings volunteer community. The new wording recommended to be added to the Board of Ed's charter, barring a member of the Board of Ed to hold a board position with organizations that advocate or are involved in the Hastings schools, including but not limited to the PTSA, SEPTA, HEF, the Booster Club, and the village government, runs a serious risk of insulating the members of the Board of Ed and reducing our pool of volunteers. While we applaud the board for its desire to address any apparent conflicts of interest, we ask them to keep in mind that we are a small community. And while we are lucky to have so many volunteers willing to give up their time and energy, we think we can speak for the different support groups we have in our district in saying that we are always in need of whatever help we can get. In addition, we feel it is vitally important that you, the members of the Board of Ed, continue to be engaged in what's happening on the ground in our schools. And an important part of maintaining that is to be involved in the support organizations that serve our district. All of you know how much information is disseminated while setting up for a book fair, or selling snacks at a varsity basketball game, or sitting with parents at a coffee and sharing what is happening at home and what we are hearing from our children. By cutting off this association, it is weakening the insight you bring when making policy for our schools. We recognize that there is an appearance of conflict of interest, but we think this is mitigated by the fact that every support organization in our community has the same agenda and is on the same side, to do what is best for our children. Our recommendation is to increase transparency instead, perhaps by listing it on the Board of Ed website with full disclosure of members' responsibilities and actions. As an example of where we believe this has worked effectively, President Emerita Lisa Liffin's work with the PTSA has been fully transparent. At the last Hastings High School parent meeting, Lisa presented, at my request, a letter signed by the Hastings-on-Hudson PTSA board that we sent to the New York State Board of Regents, asking the regents to remove Education Commissioner Aaliyah for her initial support of a homework assignment that asked children to assume that they are Nazi Party officials and to argue for either side of the final solution of the extermination of the Jews. As a board, we agreed that there are not two sides to genocide, and the letter was sent with unanimous board support and received strong approval in the parent meeting. It was also reviewed in advance by Dr. Montesano, and many of you applauded the effort as well when Lisa sent you the link to the Washington Post educational website, where the letter had been printed in full. We are proud to have been one of the first, but certainly not the last, to voice concern for Commissioner Aaliyah's lack of judgment on this issue, especially in light of today's political climate and our own community's struggle with racism. This sort of cooperation showed true alignment on this potentially divisive issue. To our regret, Lisa informed the PTSA weeks ago that she will be unable to help as much as she has had in the past, but would continue to assist with advocacy work. We are grateful for whatever time she is able to give until someone else is willing to step in. As you all know, there is never a shortage of work that needs to be done, so we hope you will continue to allow Board of Ed members to serve in any way that they can with our tiny district's extraordinary support organizations. Thank you.
Okay, so if anybody else wants to make a comment, you can do it now, or we can do it again later. We have another public comment later. Okay. All right, then why don't we go on to the report from the superintendent.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. a few things to be able to share with the board and public that I think you'll enjoy. First, we had our first Euro Challenge team take third place. It is really terrific for first time participating school under the direction of John Buchanan. I know he doesn't like to take a lot of the accolades during times like this, but he really worked well with the kids, and we're very, very proud of this group of youngsters who performed so well in this challenge, and hopefully next year, if it continues, they'll do even better. But
Could you just explain what the Euro Challenge team?
Yeah, from what I understand, I can't say I'm that well versed in it, but they had to pick a European country and examine the economics of that country, and I think they picked Slovakia, if I'm not mistaken, and had to delve into the entire economics of the country. And I don't know what they did as far as the challenge was. I don't know if they had to debate it or share with it or make conclusions. I'm not quite sure all the intricacies of that, but
It's great.
it had to do with that part of it. So yeah, unless you guys know more, because I'm not sure of all of it. One of our teachers, Ahava Steinbauer, was chosen to present at an event at a K-12 educator event, and she did talk about the topic of student-directed IEPs. Ahava has been taking a leadership role in having more of our students be involved in their IEP development, and so I'd like to give her some kudos and credits for presenting and representing us very well there. If you didn't get a chance to see the AP art show, it was set up in the library, and it was just really, really, really impressive. If you had an opportunity to walk through, it's just a highlight of this time of year, going up to see the outstanding talents of our young artists. It was really fascinating. We have another art show coming up the 15th and 16th in the Cochran Gym. So
That's actually my daughter's office.
I know it is. I was going to get to that. The one on your right is the work of
You
Jamie.
might see my son at the bottom.
Yeah. Which one was you? I think there's one of you up there too.
Yeah,
isn't
that
there?
one
Yeah.
didn't seem to make the cut.
Yeah. It was on the other side of the board, I think. We also had one of our students receive I think it's Marjo, a foundation grant for her study. One of our research science students. I want to congratulate her and Melissa Chandra for that direction. She's going to be receiving $1,000 and $2,500 to cover her project costs, and the science department will also receive $500. There were 5 grants awarded, and it was open to students in New England and New York State.
Wow.
So it's quite impressive. So congratulations to Maya Poxman on that.
Nice.
Well done. The Taste of Hastings is happening this Saturday evening. It's their Ed Foundation annual fundraiser. I hope you all have a chance to get out and have a good time with your neighbors and colleagues, and hope they do well for us. And the League of Women Voters is sponsoring a candidates night next Thursday, May 4th, 7 o'clock at Hillside School.
This
I'm sorry.
Thursday.
That's 2 nights from now.
2 nights from now, that's what I said, May 4th, oh boy. And the Hillside School Cafe. So please come out and look at our board candidates. And we do have our school budget vote and board elections coming up on May 16th.
Will the film of this be on the district website afterwards? I know last year I think it was only on the district, the village website for a while. Will it be
Yeah.
on the school website as well?
We can request it be put on there, sure. I don't see why not. I mean, I'm certainly okay with that. If the board is okay with it, if that's what you want to do, it's fine with me, sure. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. And our next meeting will be on Tuesday, May 16th. To get here, vote early and vote often for the Board of Ed candidates and the budget. So we'll see you in a couple weeks. That's it.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Mia, we moved around the public comment, so did you want to make a comment?
Is this the
Oh,
first?
This is the
Or-
first.
No, not.
Okay, all right. All right, moving on to the business items. Questions? And you need to pull out, hold on separately.
There was just one, Maureen, I had asked you about the tools forever. I couldn't see, there were a number of different pay scales that we could do, and I couldn't tell which one we were authorizing.
think let me just skip to that back page there. It was the first, it would be the silver annual support, so it would be the initial cost to set up is that $13,000 cost. So that's a software that that is at the request and was part of our software budget as a network administrator, and it's a software that allows kind of a one-step in setting up a profile for either students or staff, and it allows then to all their accounts to be created in the different areas in which they need to be, and it gives them greater control and ensuring that like we have a better control on the setup of accounts and also the disabling of accounts, because for us when our auditors look at things, if there's somebody who comes and goes and they have a network account or any type of software account, everything is done by different individual departments right now. So they wanted a way to kind of be able to create accounts at the network level and then push it out to either whatever permissions you may need within the systems that we have. So it's something that a lot of other schools have. So the first year,
Sounded good. I just couldn't tell how.
yeah, the first year setup is it's a lot of work, work, and then as you can tell, it's based upon the user count, which is students and staff, and then the ongoing support though is $900 a year. So.
Okay, can I get a vote then, or a motion to approve items 1 through 18 as a consent?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Personnel items, anything people need to pull out in any of the sections, A, B, or C? Oh, wait, no. This is personnel, this is different. Why is this personnel item here, though?
Because
Christina Klett?
it's the removal of the position, so it was...
I mean, okay.
Usually I pull them out and put them under appointments and all that, but this is actually the removal.
Okay. My problem is I'm not logged in, so I'm looking at the paper copy. All right, so we'll move on to the placement for CSE and CPSE. Okay. Can I get a motion then to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Okay. The next item is the Western Putnam School Board Association budget vote and the Board of Directors vote. Lisa, were you going to attend this meeting, their budget meeting?
I don't think I knew about it. When is it?
May 22nd.
I may be out of town. I have to say, maybe in.
Okay,
It's
because
a meeting in the evening?
because we can either vote at the meeting or we can do it here and send it in.
Let's do the vote here just in case, because we're planning a trip right around then.
Okay.
So that's what's making me,
All right.
I haven't committed it yet, so.
Okay, did anybody have questions on their budget, or? Anybody know how many people actually work there? Is it 2 or 3? Is it just 3 people, like Margaret and Lisa? It's a small budget.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the
About
whole
2 or
thing.
3
It's a
people.
1% increase.
Yeah. But I wasn't sure whether it was 2 or 3, but, okay.
Roy, do you go to that?
No, it's just for the school board. Can I get a motion to approve then?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And all those in favor? Okay, so I guess we vote for the whole 6.
I guess they don't have a 4% fund balance
No.
requirement.
No.
They have 50%.
Okay, so now we're at the real personnel. There are a lot of appointments, a couple of goodbyes, a couple of retirements and resignations. Anybody have any questions, comments? Okay. Can you get a motion to approve all the personnel items then? And a second? Thank you, Tim. All those in favor? Obviously, Laura and Eileen,
Yeah.
bon voyage.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're
We've been
going.
here a
but
long time.
Been here a long time.
Long
Thank you
time.
for everything you've done. It's been great. So, same with Jeremy. And Jamie is actually, this is her resignation so that she can move into the...
Right, so because it's a different tenure area, she
Right.
needed to resign from her
Yeah.
elementary teaching spot in order to take the library media spot.
So she has to re-earn tenure.
Correct.
Is that 2 years then instead of 3, or it's
No.
No.
back to 3?
No, it's
3
4.
instead of 4.
Three instead of four.
Instead of 4.
Although, yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, it's 3 instead of 4, right?
It used to be 2 and 3,
Yeah.
and then it changed to 3
Right,
and
it
4.
does say on this the part. Did you look at the
Which one?
resolution? Just if you look at the resignation resolution.
For Jamie?
Yeah, is that what we want the minutes to reflect?
Part-time, she said.
Where does it say that? I'm
It
not
says
sure.
PT elementary school.
Where?
On
number
not
2.
her letter.
Okay,
No.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. I just the way it's listed on the
Oh.
agenda.
Okay. Because she's in a part-time position. That's really her spot on the, as it needs to reflect her full-time elementary position because she was on a leave of absence from a full-time as a full-time teacher, so it should reflect the full-time. And that's what her letter reflects.
Right, it does, right. I'm sorry.
So it's just here in the agenda?
motion.
Okay, so it's just full-time?
Should be full-time rather than
Elementary
part-time.
school versus full-time?
Yes, her letter is accurate, the motion is not.
Okay, all right.
I'll give you the wording to
Thank you.
reflect correctly.
And why is it as of August instead of the end of June when the school year ends? Any particular reason?
No. You know,
But it doesn't really
because the
matter.
other one doesn't start till September 1st,
Oh, it doesn't?
technically.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay. All right, so, policies. So we have one policy that we're considering tonight. This is what Jackie was talking about earlier. Sorry.
You want to do a motion on retirements and resignations?
Didn't we
We
do
did
them all?
all. Just
Yeah,
We did all.
I did everything.
I came in after it changed that.
It was part of personnel.
This is a clarification.
Right.
Roy said the letter is correct that we acted on. This the wording needs to reflect that.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, so Don, you want to?
Sure. So we had our policy committee meeting today, and one of the things that we discussed was an edit to policy 2121, which is Board of Ed members' qualifications, and we discussed it and at the meeting, and I'll go through what the changes are, but we decided that even though it was kind of last minute to put it up for the first read, we wanted to just get it out here so we could just talk about it as a group and see, what the rest of the board thought. Basically, what the change is that where it lists what the qualifications are, item F said must not simultaneously hold another incompatible public office. And based on sort of past practice, what we wanted to elaborate on and sort of further explain there was we wanted instead to say must not simultaneously hold another incompatible board office. Board offices deemed incompatible include board positions with organizations that advocate or are involved in the Hastings schools. These include but are not limited to the PTSA, SEPTA, Hastings Education Foundation, booster clubs, and the Hastings Village Government. And we, this had come up from a number of different sources. People had been approached, and and based on what prior to this year, what had been sort of standard practice. I know several of us that have been on the board for a long time. When we came on the board, we had all been involved with other organizations. I know I had been the treasurer of the PTSA for more years than I want to count, and was asked at the time by the board president to step down from that position. It didn't mean I couldn't be involved in the PTSA. I stayed on running the PTSA used book fair up until I think either the year my kids I think it was the year my kids graduated. The last ones graduated high school, and even since then have helped work on the book fair. But I did step down from being on the board, and I know other board members had done that in the past. And so I think that's basically what this is doing. Is not saying that people can't be involved in other organizations at all. It's basically just saying they shouldn't simultaneously hold board positions with other organizations that either advocate for or are involved in the schools or the village. So we just wanted to get, Lisa and Eileen and I are on the policy committee, but we just wanted to hear from other board members and get their take on this and whether they think that this is something that we should. I feel like suddenly my sound went away.
Time for Donna to be quiet.
So I'm stopping talking now. Someone else say something.
Can I just clarify, is it the red language that's been added? Is
Yes.
that what
Yes.
That's the proposed change.
The proposed change.
black
proposed
is currently,
addition.
In our
Is it essentially
policy.
just clarifying
So
definitionally?
the black's in the manual.
Yes.
The black is the current
Or is
policy.
something actually changing? here? I
My,
thought it was
my,
clarification
sure.
or change.
My take on it was that it was a clarification. In talking at the policy committee meeting this morning, I think Lisa felt that the word public office had a more specific meaning that would mean, say, like village government, whereas I think what had been my understanding and why, I had been asked to step down from my board position in the PTSA when I joined the school board was based on it not necessarily being a public office. So that's why what you're looking at, Doug, was what I had passed around at our meeting this morning, but in the conversation we talked about, instead of saying incompatible public office, say incompatible board office.
Doug, just to clarify what you were asking, so it is a change as opposed to a clarification, because the original language came from the New York State legislature, which says you can't hold two incompatible public offices. I researched, and public office means an extension of the government. And that's why I said these organizations are private organizations. They report to memberships. So
Exception
by
of the
taking out
village government.
Instead of having it be two incompatible public offices, it's now being changed, or like I said, what Donna and Eileen are asking is, do you want to change it to be that this is a public office with board memberships and school groups that support the schools?
So given what this says here, could you be on the board and a secretary of the PTSA? No.
No.
Okay. That's what, okay.
I guess I have a very simplistic question. What's incompatible? Like just walk me through what the conflict of interest is. Like where did the conflict of interests arise?
Well, I think, to me, the sort of fundamental idea is that as a board of education member, you are representing everybody. We're not elected like as senators where you have a constituency, and so you're supposed to be representing everybody and taking everybody's and balancing all the competing interests, because not everybody comes with the same interests into the board and into budget requests and policy requests and things like that. So the idea is to eliminate problems that could arise if you have a position on a group that is at odds with the sort of the feeling of the board as a whole, because you are only a member of, you don't have any power as an individual board member, but you have it as a member of a board, so we have to act collectively, and in that sense I think that you can end up with some conflicts.
Which is not necessarily to say that we have in the past year, but it just feels cleaner this way, because you don't have people representing, for example, if you're on the board of the foundation or the Yellow Jackets I think the Yellow Jackets Booster Club or the Theater Booster Club are examples of organizations that have specific things they're advocating for.
Yeah, they have financial needs.
Right. And back when I was on the PTSA, you had the vice presidents for each building would meet on a regular basis with the principals in that building. The presidents of the PTA would meet on a regular basis with the superintendent in what's sort of a different kind of role than the role that the school board has, where we're the superintendent's boss.
Oh, you're the hiring body. Yeah,
Exactly. So, to have someone that potentially could be, coming to the superintendent that way, asking for things as a rep of the PTSA or SEPTA or any of these other organizations, but at the same time as serving as that person's boss, can be, it certainly has nothing to do with people being actively involved in the schools. I think all of us have been and are actively involved in the schools. But I think it has to do with
It doesn't in any way prevent being an active member. It just means you can't hold a board position.
Yeah, and that, like I said, I mean, I'm speaking for my own personal, I mean, Jody and Eileen can speak for what their experience has been, but for me, I stepped down from being the treasurer because that was part of the executive board at the PTSA, but I continued to run the youth book fair until my kids graduated, and even after they graduated, I continued to donate books, price books, help sell books, you know. I mean, being involved that way, or, you know, going to liaison meetings that are run by the PTSA is certainly something that as board members we like to do because we hear more directly, you know, from groups of parents at those meetings. But I think it's different than being in a position on a board that potentially, you know, and it's not that we say we treat these organizations as being at odds with the school district. These are organizations that are advocating for things that the school's advocating for, but I just think it can be a little bit awkward given that the superintendent is both, you know, working for the school board and then potentially being, you know, having someone who is one of the superintendent's bosses also sort of coming and advocating with him for something for one of these organizations. And I think, you know, in the past, I think it was more of just sort of board practice that we didn't simultaneously hold these positions, and so this was...
This is really aligning it with the board practice.
So the policy committee got together, discussed and debated this morning.
Yes.
Aligned on this language?
No, not necessarily.
No, we're clearly not.
Okay.
We discussed, there were three of us there, three board members and Roy, and Eileen and Donna liked this, and I had issues about it, and I said, let's bring it tonight and see what everybody feels.
Yeah. You know, in general, I think by the time we bring a policy to the board, we are all in the same place, and so the first read is usually a silent read. It's just a chance for everyone to read it, but this time the three of us thought it would make sense to hear what the rest of you thought about it before we either went forward with this for a second read or, you know, maybe did some additional editing on it, or, you know, we just wanted to hear what the rest of you thought.
So I think Donna and Eileen have both stated some of what I think about this. I very much appreciated Jackie's comments, although I don't agree with her, because I do think that, well, for starters, there's no question to me that volunteers are so key to this community. I mean, here we are. We don't get paid a lot of money to do this. And there are many other things that we all volunteer in the community, whether it be the PTSA or coaching or things at places of worship. We could go on and on. And if you went to the volunteer fair on Sunday, if anybody, I know Mia was there, but if people came by, it was really impressive to see the amount of volunteering that goes on in this community. It was really pretty heartwarming and really very powerful to be there. But I do feel very strongly that once somebody is on the Board of Ed, given what your role is as a board member, that it is a conflict of interest to be a board member of another organization. And I think Donna just said it. I think the way you described it concretely is really it, that you can't be both the boss of the superintendent and coming to advocate for something. I think that is a conflict of interest. That doesn't mean you can't be on the PTSA or you can't be, you know, a member of HEF or SEPTA, and it doesn't mean you can't be actively involved. In fact, I think one should be. But when I was president, when I went on the board, I stepped down from being president of the PTSA, and I was asked to, and it was very clear to me that that was the appropriate thing to do. You know, Jackie made reference to the letter that was written that I think we were all very pleased about, and the whole notion of there not being two sides for genocide. I think it was great that that the letter was sent. I don't think it was appropriate to have somebody from the Board of Ed signing that letter.
Jody? I didn't sign the letter. It was signed by the Board of Ed presidents.
I thought she said that you had signed the letter.
No, it was signed Jacqueline Weitzman and Dawn Campson, PTSA co-presidents. Those were the signatures on the letter.
But then why was she bringing that up in what she was talking about?
Why was who bringing something?
Why was Jackie bringing it up? I thought she was talking about that letter and that you had been a part of that letter.
I drafted the letter, but you said signed the letter. I didn't sign the letter.
I apologize. I thought you said that you had signed the letter, but I just think
It
that...
would be inappropriate for me to sign it. It was signed by the board co-presidents.
Okay, but I think that I actually don't see the problem with stepping down from a board position in another role in the community. But again, I think it's important to stay involved, and I don't think this policy is saying that people shouldn't stay involved. But I do think that there's a very clear conflict of interest once somebody gets onto the Board of Ed. So I would support the policy as it's been, the changes.
Yeah, I mean, my question, just on that, I agree with all of your comments, Jody. I think what makes this community work ultimately is the number of volunteers across the entire spectrum. My question was, where do the conflict of interest lie? Because that ultimately should determine how you vote, whether you see conflict of interest or the potential conflict of interest or not. This idea where you could be both the superintendent's, ultimate boss and in a separate venue be tasked with being the person that asks something of that superintendent, I think that does represent a problem. It clearly doesn't mean that you shouldn't remain part of all of these other groups, or any one individual should remain in an active, meaningful part, but just not in a executive role. So I guess, although, look, I'm willing to hear the other side of that, but that does make sense to me.
Doug, any thoughts?
I mean, I think we're obviously talking about one very specific situation here, but we're talking about it in a general fashion. And
No, but I think it could be,
I understand that. I understand that.
going forward, it could happen other time again.
I mean, I would like to hear, like Tim, I mean, I think on the surface, you read this and you say, makes sense, right? I mean, you just kind of I think all the arguments laid out, conflict of interest, makes sense. Lisa is an extremely intelligent attorney and has thought through all of these and still takes a position that that's not the case. So that's fascinating to me, and I'd love to know why.
Well, I'm happy actually to gather my thoughts.
But Doug, I understand what Lisa said, is that given the way the law was written and how it came down, it had to do with a governing body like the village board, as opposed to
I haven't said anything yet.
School board.
What did you say when you said I understand what Lisa said? But
I thought I understood that what you were saying was the
I didn't
reason.
say anything yet.
No, you did before. You explained that when you got on the board.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
You
yes.
said the signature. Okay.
No, but when you
no,
explained that when you got on the board, you had checked.
Well, in my response, okay, so then,
Yeah.
so there was an email that I had responded to. Is that what you're talking about, in response to the email?
No, just your comment on public office, just the definition of public office.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's it.
Go ahead, Lisa, why don't you?
Oh, okay, sure. So I first learned of this proposed rules change at the policy committee meeting at 2:30 today. So that's why I've written my thoughts, because like I said, I had this. So there's a few things I just wanted to comment about, and I've numbered them, being the insanely organized person I am. Number one, the rule you propose states that holding offices in school groups is incompatible with being on the Board of Ed. I know you've explained why you thought, but I'll tell you my view. The groups you list are the PTSA, SEPTA, the Hastings Education Foundation, and the Booster Club. And I don't see how they're incompatible. Two of the groups are purely or almost purely fundraising groups. They're so compatible, that's the Boosters and HEF, they're so compatible that Gab Lesser stated at our July Board of Ed meeting that other education foundations in other districts actually have Board of Ed members and even superintendents sitting on their boards. With respect to the PTSA's mission is to promote the welfare of children. SEPTA is a unit of the New York PTA, and it focuses on supporting families and children, especially those with special needs. How can these missions be incompatible with the mission of the district? They're not. They're complementary. As an aside, The law allows that when people hold two public government office titles, which is in the law, where there's an occasional conflict, the person should just recuse himself or herself. Number two, the impact of the rule. And I think this is what Jackie Weitzman raised. The rule would take people out of their volunteer roles in organizations that support our school. It's so hard to get volunteers. We need to encourage volunteerism, not discourage it. Jody said, kind of, you can still work. What's the difference with removing your title? With respect to me, I actually, unfortunately, occupy a unique place in the PTSA and in our district. I am the advocacy person for the PTSA. Our advocacy is deep and robust. We've had, I think, probably 3 or 4 articles published this year, one in the Washington Post. Diane Ravitch blogs our stuff. Part of it is because I have a background in regulatory law, because I went to law school in Washington, D.C. It's complex. It's hard stuff. And it's really hard to make it in plain English. I've been trying to pass on the advocacy torch. I had a group of 5 terrific people last year, and we just tried, couldn't get it off the ground. This board is much more resistant to the advocacy efforts generally, is what we found. There are certain things I've brought to you that you have not wanted to put the Board of Ed title on. So if I am not an advocacy chair, PTA emerita, the advocacy ends. So that's an answer to your question, going back to volunteerism. Third point that I wanted to raise. The timing of the proposed rule change is troubling. Because there is a candidate, it's not just, you said it seems to hit me, it also hits Christina Mitchell. There is a candidate for the Board of Ed who is a current co-president of SEPTA, and that's Christina. Christina's candidacy was public knowledge by April 18th, when the petitions were due. Janine picked the names, it was public knowledge. A week later, on April 25th, our board president, Eileen, sent an email saying, for the first time, that we need to take a look and clarify the language in the policy regarding which hats a Board of Ed member can wear. Today, at our policy committee meeting, I saw for the first time this draft changed. It's attached to our agenda if anybody wants to see it. And it specifically excludes officers in a number of groups, including SEPTA. At the policy committee meeting, policy committee members spoke specifically about Christina and their concerns about her strong ties with SEPTA should she win her Board of Ed election. So to change, and this is the lawyer in me, we're fiduciaries. More than anything, we are fiduciaries. To change a rule after a candidate has declared that she will run, and to change it in a way that directly impacts her, in my opinion, gives what we call in law the appearance of impropriety. I don't support this change, but if my board mates, if the 6 of you, choose to adopt this change, I suggest that Christina be grandfathered in, and that I am grandfathered in as well, to show the public that the rule change would be done for purely principled reasons and not for personal reasons. Fourth point. Again, since I only got the rule at 2:30 today, I called the attorneys at the New York State School Board Association to ask about the propriety of such a rule change at this point in an election. The attorney actually pointed out that there is a provision in the law that says this action, this change, may well be illegal, and that we need to pass it on to our school attorneys. He pointed me to this provision. This is the book, School Law. It's the 36th edition. On page 63, section 6.1 and 6.2. Section 6.1 says, what are the qualifications for membership of the school board? This is set out by the New York State Legislature, and it's what we have in our policy. So we mirror the language, more or less. Maybe we change one word in an insignificant way. And that's where it says you have to be able to read and write, you have to have lived here for a year. That was the problem you had, Rob, when you applied for Tim's seat. It says you may not simultaneously hold another incompatible public office. That's where you all got the language from. But then the second point, and this is what the NYSBA attorney, the New York State School Board attorney, pointed out, 6.2, may a school district impose additional requirements for school board membership, which is what this is. And the answer is no. A school board may not require candidates for school board position to meet eligibility requirements in addition to those imposed by statute. And the rationale is because rules could be targeted to impact potential candidates. Now, regardless of what anyone's actual intentions are, This proposed rule change gives the appearance of an improper act. It gives the appearance of targeting Christina Mitchell. And when you couple that with the district's relationship with SEPTA, with what it has been over the past few years, to call it strange is to put it mildly. This year, we're in a better place. We're moving forward. Again, this rule, to me, is ill-advised on many, many levels. But I think as a threshold matter, it needs to be given to our school attorneys, as the New York State School Board Association suggested, to see if it actually is illegal.
I mean, I have no problem with doing that.
I have no
Yeah.
problem with doing that either.
Did anybody have comments on any of the other points?
Yeah, I do. I had comments on several, but I'm not going to do that. But I appreciate that. I had no idea this was coming up, by the way, and I appreciate what you're saying of the appearance, at least. I don't know about intent, but of the appearance of it being perhaps directed at Christine. But what I don't understand on a really simple level, and I'm not being a lawyer here, is why couldn't, if you and Christine were on the board, why can't you still be involved with PTSA and SEPTA, but not be on their board? Why can't you still do advocacy, but not be on the board? And I think that because of the role of the board in terms of the relationships to the superintendent and the relationship you have to the superintendent as a board member. That's, to me, the bottom line, really.
Doesn't Tim have a similar problem? He's
What?
married to his wife. He's the boss of him, and he's the boss of his wife. I thought that's what you were saying before, that in one position we're dealing with the superintendent as us being a boss to him, and in another position we're coming to him wanting something.
But wait a minute. Roy is not Tim's boss. If Steve Tuber...
His spouse's boss.
I know. But if Steve Tuber was on the PTSA and he was the president, I don't think that would keep me from being on the board. Roy is not Tim's boss. Roy is Tim's spouse's boss. If my spouse was on the PTSA, I think I could still, me as my own individual person, be on the Board of Ed. I don't think it's equivalent.
I guess what I'm trying to point out is I feel like you're saying there's a conflict in one area and not in another. I'm not saying whether I agree or not, but I will say, going back to you, but let me put this out to you. Again, I don't see any incompatibility, but I want to put this out to you when you're saying, why can't you still do the work? So say I didn't wear a title for the PTA, and I had come to you guys telling you about this Mary Ellen Aaliyah, our commissioner, how she supported an assignment that would allow children to argue for the Holocaust. And I said, I want to write a letter asking for her removal. Would this board have approved it?
Do you really think it makes a difference because you're a board member with a title versus a person in the community coming to bring that up? Would that really make a difference?
I think the Washington Post printed it and got that much more readership of it because there was a title, as opposed to being an ordinary community member. But that's my question.
But there are other people who have titles who could have sent the letter who could send the letter. I don't think we need to spend more time, because I don't think we're going to come to an agreement. But I just don't think, especially in a community like this, if you or anybody came with a letter or something of concern, I don't think we wouldn't listen to it, because, I like to think that Hastings is a place that isn't just going to... I never thought when I was president of the PTSA that it was because I had a title that I could wield some power.
But you haven't done advocacy at the state and national level. The title really does that's what carries it. I'm not talking about advocacy in this room. I'm talking about...
Then you maybe have to make a choice about what you want to do.
I try to respect you and not interrupt, so please do the same for me. Thank you. So, we have a lot of education changes coming down the pike very fast, and we've had them for the past few years. So if you really, again, I'm talking uniquely to advocacy, that title does help, and this board, despite the request of the PTSA to do more, it hasn't done a lot. It's done this is what I've seen from this board. I've seen that when it comes from the Westchester School Board Association, that you're happy to go with it. But I can tell you this year, I had an article about technology, about Common Core, that I floated to you guys and said, do you want me to sign this with my board title? And I was told no. So, in answer to your question,
because we thought
there is some that's cut off. So it does get cut back.
But I think then you have to make a choice, and I think if that's what's important, I think you could be the advocacy consultant to the PTSA, and they could still send a letter unless you feel like it's so important that it be your name that's on it. But then I think you have to make that choice.
I didn't have my name on it.
Okay, then why can't you still do advocacy and work with the PTSA?
What's the difference with the title at that point? I think we're talking in circles.
Because part of the title is... No.
To me, I don't see a conflict. I see complementary missions, and I see great work being done hand in hand together. That's the way I look at it, and I don't feel that my board mates are seeing that, and that's okay. But that's my opinion.
Well, I would move to, just to the points you raised, have a lawyer look at it and address first that it's acceptable in its current wording from a straight legal perspective.
That's a threshold question.
That's a
Yeah.
exactly. So that's a basic question. So Stephanie can look at that. I can appreciate beyond that.
And
you know,
I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you.
No,
It just as Jody was saying,
it doesn't.
Everybody's got
I
various
think it's gray, right? Like, look, I think that's a very, fair sort of quick deduction that you work to, which is, how is that? It's slightly gray. Now you're talking about the household as a separate item. One person, the next person, they're right next to each other all the time. Why is that so different than one person that is just, there's a slight difference. I would say in terms of, trust me, it doesn't feel to be picked on anyway. But I think there's a slight difference in terms of the level of interaction, the regular interaction that you will have with the superintendent as a sitting board member, and then the other regular interaction you wind up having through periodic meetings as a president of a significant school organization, volunteer school organization. Slightly different than maybe a more nuanced interaction of a teacher who's going to have very irregular interactions with the superintendent, potentially zero over the course of an academic year, and a spouse as a board member. So slightly different, but they do overlap to a degree. I think the threshold question needs to be answered. And then beyond that, from a personal perspective, I'm not hearing an answer as to why handing over the executive title to other committed members of a particular group, but maintaining a very high level of involvement and advocacy, because
Let's keep this from the personal.
Yeah, away from the
principled decision,
no, exactly.
Decision.
Yeah, and I think
so you have
particularly, I would say, with a new, and this is what I'm thinking of when I try to take in these facts, with a new superintendent coming on board. That's where it gets tricky, I would say, because you have to appreciate, if you have a new superintendent who's potentially not that experienced, that then is hypothetically in a situation where they say, okay, I'm seeing this person with a dual hat. That's the one area where I go.
But the only thing I would say is I think we need to make our laws not based on our personnel. I think it needs to be based on what's right. I just want to throw something out. How do you all feel about making this decision now during an election? That impacts.
I think I don't think it has to be made now.
And you can put it off till there's a new board in July, or you could grandfather in the impacted people. But how do you feel about, because right now, this feels very, very wrong to me.
I think you could put it off until there's a new board. I don't think that this is...
let me just, because I'm the one that brought this up to the committee today. In my mind, Lisa, part of the reason that I think that this was an issue, we were all surprised at the beginning of the year when, that you were staying on the PTSA board. And in my mind, by waiting and potentially making this change at the end of the year, it was actually a way of not having it be something that was specifically about you. It was just a question of going back to what had been the past.
It's about me. I said it's about her.
Well, but you said, but it's not about either of you individually, because, as I said, the past practice, all of us, I mean, Karen Campbell, Wendy Nadich, Jody, Eileen, I think Gab was on the foundation
But
board.
you're talking 10 years ago when that happened, Donna. You guys all came on 10 years ago.
We didn't all come on at the same time, Lisa. The point is that the
We're
past...
talking pre-2009.
Okay, now...
What does that timing make?
I'm just saying, she said, like, it's custom. It
I'm
hasn't
saying it was the
been
past...
brought into
You're not letting
action.
me finish my sentence.
Go ahead.
The past practice for every board member up until this year had been this, and so the feeling was if the policy wasn't clear, that what we were all under the assumption at the time that was the policy, and since clearly the policy wasn't clear, I thought it would be a good idea to clarify it. And by doing it at the end of the year so it didn't affect what had happened this year, that seemed to me better timing than doing it smack in the middle of the year when you're, that would, to me, would have a direct impact on you. And until we were in the policy committee meeting earlier today, Lisa, I didn't even realize that you thought that you were staying on as emeritus, because to me, to be chair of the advocacy committee isn't necessarily a board position. It's like being chair of the used book fair. So I don't see that as a conflict.
No, well, I've been staying on as emeritus.
This year, yes.
Right. And then I was told that that's actually a position that continues. And the PTSA would very much like me to continue my advocacy work.
Right, and I don't see anything wrong with you continuing your advocacy work.
Let's go back to the question that I asked before about dealing with this during this election period. And it sounds like you're saying, because when you first asked me in July about holding the dual hat, I remember you were very surprised because your board president had asked you to leave. And I said that I had talked, again, to attorneys at the New York State School Board Association who said, no, it's absolutely fine that you can stay. So that was the conversation we had then.
It was the conversation we had then. That's
So-
exactly what the conversation was. And so that's why, based on, and then when I went back and read this, I read it differently than you did. And you explained to me in the meeting today that public office had a specific meaning. And so if it's illegal for us to make an additional requirement, obviously we're not going to. So I think we all agreed that the next step would be to go back to our attorney and find that out. Until we have that answer, there isn't even an issue.
Of course,
right?
that's why I raised it. It's
Yeah.
in all likelihood it's illegal.
Well, and if it is, then it's a dead issue, Lisa. We're not going to do something that's illegal.
Right, no, I think she gets that.
I don't understand why you're saying that to me. That's what I said before to you. So, but then we were continuing to talk about it. And again, I am troubled, especially since it involves SEPTA. We're trying to heal this relationship. I don't know why now. And again, I would say, depending on what our attorneys say, if it's illegal, then it's out the door. If
Right.
the attorneys say proceed, then I suggest grandfathering her in, grandfathering me in, or waiting until after the election, till after July 1st, and
Yeah.
having a new board.
Then I would move to that. If it is deemed to be legal, I think you wait till you have, the final structure of the board available, and then, certainly in the case of Christina, if, elected, you can make you can be part of the decision-making process and decide if you feel that that's right in terms of making a clear message, or a clear statement to the community. I think that is totally and completely reasonable.
It keeps the appearance of propriety. And in addition, if you think about why the law is this way, it makes sense because it's to stop rule changes that would reduce the pool of candidates. You could put in a rule that says you have to own property to be on the board. You have to have a college degree. There's lots of, but that's why that rule is, that's why it is illegal, and the legislature has stated the qualifications. Again, you ask Keenan, being our attorneys, their thoughts on it. I expect they're going to say that this is illegal.
All right, and that's where it goes. But I do want to just say, this is not targeted, and we really, for myself, I will speak for myself.
Well, the
Not trying to
timing
target,
makes
but-
it look that way.
And I agree, and so I'm okay if you want a grandfather or whatever, but I think that there really is an underlying conflict, so that anybody who does come onto the board and is still a member of a board of another organization, one of these other organizations, has to recognize they're in themselves where they could be pushing one agenda more than the board agenda. So when they're on the board, they really have to have that I'm representing everybody hat. And I feel that that's very important, that you don't come, that you have to really be able to balance and not be an advocate for another group that you're working closely with. And that is why I think that it makes sense to do this. That's why I thought it was a reasonable practice back in the dark ages when I came onto the board. But, times change. If people want to do it differently, that's fine. And it will depend on the integrity of the individuals who come onto the board to make sure that they are not letting their two roles conflict with each other and that they're really fulfilling the obligations of each. So.
And I would add, people come here with a number of roles. I mean, Jody runs Rec Center basketball with Steve, and it's an awesome, awesome program. But I think we all come with different things. Say, somebody's a specialist in whatever they do. I think calling it an agenda is maybe the wrong word. I think we all come in with our own skill sets, our own passions, our own concerns. But we're not here to serve our own concerns, and that's an oath that we take. We're here to serve the children in our district and the state of New York. So we all have to do that anyway.
I hope we're all nobly living up to those goals as we go on. And I think that this was a practice that was sort of tried to head off some problems. So hopefully everybody who does come on will, from now and forever, will, behave that way. It's not like boards don't get into trouble. So that, this was a way that had worked for this district in the past, and if it's changed, it's changed. And we'll just figure out whether it's legal or not. So.
Okay, and please include me, or do you want me to write to Stephanie and send it? Or I'd like to be included on whatever the communication is about this. Stephanie's our attorney, for those people watching.
Do you want to write it?
Sure.
Okay. Go for it. All righty, let's move on then. So at the moment, we'll just hold off and figure out if we're if the thing goes on for another week. All right, so minutes. These are the minutes from the April 25th meeting.
Oh, sorry, one small thing, and it might not be meaningful. It calls it a regular Board of Education meeting. Is it considered a regular meeting? It was just where we only voted on that budget.
It was regular Board of
It is
Education
considered,
meeting.
okay, that's fine.
One topic, yeah, one topic.
And you only go into exec from a regular meeting anyway.
Okay.
So it always ends up being. Okay, can I get a motion to approve?
Someone.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. We had a number of meetings today. Facilities, we spoke about a couple of different things. One is that we actually received some extra income this year, both through some sleuthing that Maureen did about rentals from BOCES. They rent some of the space in the downstairs portion of the middle school, and they owed us some back rent, basically. Well, in a nutshell, we'll call it that.
Just the price, I didn't think.
Price adjustment.
Price adjustment.
So we got some
In our
there,
favor.
and then also because of the filming that's gone on, so there is new revenues that we could either put through to the reserve lines and feed back to the bottom line, or we can use it to address some of those facility issues. So we spent some time talking about that. The net was that we are going to get a sort of itemized list of the things that they would think about spending the monies on, and then we'll sort of pick, sort of out of those priorities.
And then we also, we'll be working to provide the entire board an updated 5-year plan in terms of just so you can see everything that's kind of on the radar,
Right.
in addition to prioritizing like projects for the immediate.
Because we're like 2 years into the old plan, so you have to give one to the state every 5th year. So we're 2 years into that one, but so it's just sort of an update on where we are in that. The other thing was that Maureen is going to be talking to the custodial union about renewing their contract.
Well, that's in the finance.
Oh, I'm sorry, where am I? I'm on the wrong
You're in
one.
facilities.
With
They kinda had
facilities,
a-
What's kind of a blur
I
today?
just want to say one thing about
Yeah.
facilities also, that we got this extra little money. I mean, one could argue that we should just put it towards the bottom line, but I think there's so many facility needs within the district that I think we're lucky to have some extra money to put towards it. And so once we get Joe's list of priorities, which we'll barely be able to touch.
I think we've been doing a better job the last few years between the bond and some spending out of our capital reserve that we've definitely we're catching up on some of the things that during the course of when the economy had really tanked that we really had for 5 years or so really did minimal to no work in the district in terms of repair. So we're I think we're in a good spot, so it'd be good to kind of keep the momentum in getting things accomplished.
So that segues into finance.
I was like,
So we talked about the extra monies that came in, and we also talked about going to negotiations with the union, and so Maureen is going to be heading that, and so we'll find out over the next couple of weeks what the,
and we'll probably meet in executive session once I kind of have a sense of, like, just even...
their demands, yeah.
Or, I don't like to use the word demands.
Okay.
Requests.
All right, I think those are for finance, right?
On finance side, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Policy, we obviously talked about the one that we talked about this evening. We also talked about, we are going to have to do an update on the wellness.
Yes.
So that meeting's coming up in a couple of weeks, and we'll take a look at that. It's a little different because we don't get Title I funding anymore.
Federal, funding on
Right, which is the stick that they use in that policy development activity. They say, well, if you don't have the policy we want you to have, we're going to, take away your funding. So since we don't get the funding, we're still a little bit more in control of how we want to write that policy. But that'll be going to that committee.
Which policy is that?
This
is
is
wellness.
Wellness policy.
And it's required to be looked at.
Which covers nutrition and, what you serve in the cafeterias, in the schools, how you deliver it, how you talk about it.
What is the impact of that? Is it financial impact? You've got to pay more for different food, or?
It's more about the type of food, I think,
Okay.
than the cost as
But
much.
Yeah.
the wellness policy also includes like your health curriculum,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
it kind of
And
beyond the cafeteria.
Right, and this does too. It addresses like how you talk to the students about, how you instruct them on nutrition and things like that. So it covers a sort of a bigger scope than just what's actually in the cafeteria. But that is what people tend to talk about.
It tends to become a
What's in the
cupcake
cafeteria.
conversation.
NISBA's required update was all things that were required if you were getting Title I funds. And so that this was from their second policy update, they had sent an update to the wellness policy that if you're a district that accepts Title I funds, all the updates would have been required. But since they're not in our case, the committee, as Eileen said, has more latitude about whether or not to actually do that. And then there were two other policies that we're actually going to, not existing policies, but some potential policies that we wanted to contact NISBA and see whether they had samples. And by the way, Maureen and Janine told me that they did check about whether there had been a third NISBA update, and there hasn't been one yet. And they said it's been a slow year for policy updates, so there may be one. We tentatively scheduled our next meeting for Wednesday, May 31st, Janine, but if there isn't a policy update by then we'll push it back again.
No, I thought it is what I suggested before, that the policies are so crazy now, nobody knows what's happening with the Department of Education, that everybody's on hold. That's my guess.
Okay. Did somebody go to the board student liaison?
That meeting was postponed, and they haven't rescheduled it yet.
Okay. Audit? You guys one of you want to report out on the audit?
You can see the notes here. Was there, I'm trying to remember, was this a specific audit area?
This is external.
This is the external
This is
audit.
just external?
Yes.
But we went through, it became a bit more of a nuts and bolts conversations about auditing, as you can see in the notes, which Susan took us through.
But say something out loud so people who are watching can know.
Well, this is all public, but,
And it's attached to the...
yeah, it's attached.
Nothing that's on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't remember anything specific that was interesting to you.
Yeah, I mean, this meeting is just part of the requirement. I think what Susan kind of gave a little bit of the background just in terms of why, when the state controller came out with his 5-point plan, that part of the audit process was to have this kind of preliminary audit with the audit committee, talk about like their schedule, the scope of work that they'd be doing, and just kind of going through the requirements, and also wanted to say to the audit committee that if there's any concerns or things that they, like how they would communicate that to the auditing firm, and how they would then communicate any concerns if they were to arise during the course of their audit and how their scope worked. So I think, like Doug said, it's more or less a legal requirement that they have to kind of go through, more or less like what the legal requirement tells them. They have to always assume that people have heard the spiel year after year, like what they're required to do and the way the work and the timelines and such. So that was about it. Right?
It was pretty much just process.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of process. A lot of,
That's what
I'm a new
audits-
board member.
That's what audits are.
But they do go through it even if because I think they're required to kind of hold it in such a way that is laid out by the state controller to kind of go over what they are required to. So even if people have been on the audit committee for a few years, it's a similar conversation.
Was there a need to redo or take another look at the audit policy? Or like the charter for the...
The charter.
that was on the...
Right, there was,
Yeah,
right.
we did talk about that. We've circulated that, but we haven't had that conversation yet.
And would that be part of like a policy committee kind of a thing? The audit charter, does that?
No, the
stand
charter's
alone from-
outside of the
it's outside of
policies,
it,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, a few years ago, they required that we all develop these charters, and they were mandated committees, so they stand outside of policy. It's nice that you don't have a choice. So you just do them.
Yeah, so that they were just reminding us that we were required to have it, and Gab actually found the one that we
Yeah.
had, I guess, adopted. I don't know
Right,
how many
probably
years
like,
back, so.
Yeah.
several years back, so, okay. All right, so we did have a diesel meeting this afternoon also, and there were 3 big things that were on there. Just a mention of the Netflix series on
13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, 13 Reasons Why. Apparently, it's sort of making the rounds, and particularly among the students at the middle and high schools. There's been some discussion with some of the kids, but it's primarily just trying to make parents aware that this is out there. The district did send out a letter, so hopefully people are aware of that, because it is troubling to think that some of children who are maybe fragile might take this as a way to behave. So
I think it's a romanticized version of suicide.
right, right. So the other thing that had come up was a discussion about resilience and how do you teach resilience in classes, and sort of working that into curriculum. So I think it was really just the first mention of that, and be some bit more discussion that'll go on. I'm not sure where, but maybe at faculty meeting.
We asked the teacher who brought
Carolyn
Ms.
Heckers.
Heckhouse to share. She had some information she wanted to share with principals and with the curriculum director to see how we might be able to incorporate, learn more about how to instill more
And it really came up
resiliency.
because apparently the feedback from some colleges, or a lot of colleges,
Yeah.
is that students are not coming in sort of being able to handle the bumps in the road. And they'd like to, see if there's a way that we can prepare the kids better for handling those bumps by themselves. So. But the biggest portion of the meeting was a presentation by the Race Matters and RISE. And you all remember that we've put aside $25,000 in next year's budget for supporting the work of that committee. And so we had asked them to sort of take a look at short-term and long-term goals. So they put together a good presentation. They have a lot of short-term goals and some long-term goals. It's kind of hard to see how all these things can get done, but really, I think that the net goal is to really make it an integral part of everybody's thought process on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis, where people are thinking about race, racial issues. How do you discuss issues of race, issues of discrimination, and things like that? So they're working at a lot of different fronts. Everything from how do you hire to how do you train staff. Structures were another
Some
one.
curriculum materials.
Curriculum
reviewing our
materials.
curriculum materials.
Right.
Evaluation.
Right. So, it's a little tricky because there'll be new administration, so we have to sort of make sure that that's coordinated with superintendent, but it certainly has to be coordinated just at the building administration level, because I think as much as a lot of this is coming from the organic level, you have to overlay some changes and allocate resources at an administrative level so that the two things can merge and everything gets done that they want to do. So there's a lot more discussion about who, where, when that has to happen at this point. But it was, I thought it was a really good presentation, and there's a lot of excitement about getting work going there. So that was my day.
You were here all day.
Facilities committee.
Yeah, that was the
did
first
that
one.
already.
One thing, actually, we did talk about.
We did that.
Yeah, facilities was the first one.
What about the goalposts?
That's what I was just going to bring up. The goalposts, there are goalposts that are football posts. I guess all goalposts are football posts, but anyway, they're the goalposts at the Burke Estate. So we had a conversation about that. There was a member of the community that came in. I mean, the discussion was really, we need to take a look. We're not going to be able to salvage a lot of money out of it, but we need to do a couple of things to decide what we're going to do. Is there a need for these goalposts, given the current programming? And also, within the idea of making our fields as flexible as possible. So if we're using Reynolds as a game field primarily, where are some of these other practices taking place? So when there's a soccer game, that will go on at Reynolds, but the football team would be able to practice at the Burke Estate. You can probably get away without having those there, but at some point, it reduces your flexibility if you do that. So we are looking into the cost of removing them, taking a look at trying to get some feelers to see if anybody wants them, so we could sort of repurpose them for some other district, if we can get some money out of it that way. But primarily, we have to take a look at our programming.
Yeah, I think we also discussed waiting a full season once the fields are online to see how the field is being used. The teams tend to grow in some areas and weaken in other areas, and it does go back and forth. Several years ago, there was a more robust youth football program in town and a modified program. We don't see that as much right now. Will that come back? I don't know. But I think it would be worthwhile just waiting to see how those fields being used before you decide to remove them totally. And certainly if they're not being used, if they're not needed, if the decision is to take them out at that point, that's fine. But until you have a better understanding of how that field, because we talked about rotating the fields per usage to try to rest a field each season to maintain the grass and the conditions as best we can. So we may want to just wait a little bit before that final decision is made.
And I think also the community member that was there was saying that there was some confusion because she and some other people in that neighborhood didn't think that the field where these football goals was a field that was ever going to be used for football. So that's where we were explaining this notion of part of the reason we wanted more fields was to be able to have more flexibility. And so there may have been a misconception among her and the people she was talking to as to what the purpose of each field was, because I think she seemed to feel, or what she was expressing was that she and some of the people she was talking to thought it was odd to have football goalposts at a field that was never going to be used for football. And what we were trying to explain was that what we were trying to do was give ourselves flexibility.
And it could be used for it.
And it could be used for that. And then also just sort of the aesthetic issue of whether something is not aesthetically pleasing, what you're looking at there is an athletic facility, and so one would, both at the Burke Estate and at Reynolds, anyone whose home is facing either of those places, they're not looking at a park or just a field, they're looking at an athletic facility which has athletic equipment associated with it. So that's just kind of, to some degree,
Reality of it.
The reality. Thank you, Eileen. That's the word I was looking for.
I just want to add I've had a number of parents come up and say, why are there goalposts at the Burke? And they said they don't remember any discussion of them during the bond debate or anything, no mention in materials that were sent to the community. It sounds like they were on the plans, but it was not something that was really, that got to the public. I can, that much I can put out there. It was communicated to me that I guess that they're very high. They're like the Maserati of goalposts. They bend, they swivel, and my understanding is they cost $12,000 and $6,000 to install and $2,000 to remove. Are those numbers accurate?
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
That's what was represented.
So here's my concern. I think I'm correct in saying that we haven't had a modified football team in 2 years. That would be at our
No, we still have one. It's somewhat active, somewhat inactive, but
He did have it, they just weren't
And now,
able to play all
and
the
they've been
games.
talking about merging that part as well.
Okay, and our varsity is merged.
Is merged.
So I have to say, this is not the first person who's had, a problem with their property because of what we've done with the bonds. We've had the Santoni family here because they have that, what's it called, coach's box, is that what that is? That's blocking their view. And I get that it's an athletic facility, but when they moved there, that's not what it looked like. And the same thing for the people now. I think there's 4 or 5 homes that back up to that area on the Burke. And they said, it's one thing if it's really being used, they'll take one for the team and have it there, but otherwise, they said it's unsightly, and I get that, and I just feel terrible for them. So my question is, I guess what she reported is that you want to wait and see if it's being used for football, but how much do these things go down in value? Like, if we decide to get rid of these things right now, so it's cost $2,000 to remove them, we can sell them as almost new. I think, there's people building fields all around. But if we wait, a season, if we wait a year, they're out there with the elements, they've gone down in age, what is the financial risk to the district? What will we lose? Because look, maybe I'm being a pessimist, but I find people being less interested in having their children play football the more we read about concussions. Nationally, it's going down, down, down. That's what we're seeing here. So is it wise to wait, or should we just, cut the losses right now?
First of all, I have out and looking at what the value of them are, what the value of the goalpost might be to someone else now.
Great.
Because I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly. A year from now, I have less knowledge about what they would be worth. So I can't answer that question.
Maybe we need
But
to
I would
get
say that if, in the event that it turns around, because it's possible, I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible, then you're spending more money to put them back up. So,
No, we have portable ones that can go up there that they
you
use
do.
the hillside.
You could have portable ones, that's true.
We own them.
Well, you guys can decide what you want to do. My suggestion is to wait until you see how you use the field, but if you want to take them down now, take them down now.
Can we get an estimate of what they would be worth?
That's
say,
what I just said, I was having Adam do
No,
that.
I know you said you're getting an estimate for now, but what they would be worth, say, 3 months out and 12 months out? Because
I don't know where you're going to, the value is only as good as the person buying it.
Yeah.
There's not a market per se that says.
We won't know whether
Yeah.
they retain their value or whether they drop.
I wouldn't know
There's no
that.
Edmonds on this
Yeah.
one. No
But
blue
I'm
value.
finding out now, if we were to try to sell them to another community, they would pay.
Okay.
If there is anybody.
Maybe
there.
Bronx would buy them.
Roy, when you get that,
I'll
can
bring
you
with my
let the board
trailer.
know what the dollar figure is?
I'm sorry?
Can you let the board know
Sure.
what the dollar figure is?
That's the intent, yeah.
Okay. We're up to a segment public comment. If anybody wants to make a comment?
Hello, good evening. I'm Mia Johnson. I'm at 127 Fairmount Avenue. I had 2 things I wanted to say. One was on the timing of the report of the auditor who was looking into the special education program and policies. My understanding was that the report was supposed to be delivered to the board in this spring, so I wondered what the timing was, if there was an answer, if the board knows.
Yeah, we met with the auditors, a phone conference, actually, we had it with the auditors, I'm going to say maybe 3 weeks ago. They told us they would not be ready to present until the June 6th meeting.
June 6th. And so the June 6th meeting, so that is something that we can let our community know about?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's what they told me, that was 3 weeks ago. I would
Okay.
probably tell you to just wait till I get further confirmation, but I think it's a safe, it's a safe date.
Okay, good, because it's difficult
Sure.
to... and then secondly, I just wanted to make a couple comments on the proposed Board of Ed membership policy change, sort of sitting in the audience. And my head was sort of swimming with the discussion, but a few things I just wanted to mention. I am troubled by the timing of the proposal. I was here in July when it first came up, when it was discussed about Lisa's continuing participation on the PTSA, and it was discussed in July. So for the proposal to be brought up now, just sort of as a community member, it just feels odd. I'm troubled by, I think someone used the word SEPTA agenda. Speaking as co-president of SEPTA, our agenda is to advocate for children in this district, and I'd like to think that that agenda is in line with the district. I think that I'm troubled by the assumption that one can't be both on the Board of Ed and another board, that it feels like you all are looking for a conflict. It was stated it feels awkward, it would just be cleaner. So the arguments that were presented just aren't persuasive to me. I think if you're going to be suggesting PTSA and SEPTA, what about Hastings Rise? I mean, there's probably half a dozen other community organizations perhaps that should be included. I hope no one would think that Hastings Rise's agenda is incompatible with the district. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And I again, not to point out Tim, but I've often wondered how it could be not a conflict for a Board of Ed member to live in the same household as an employee of the district. So that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Ann Cunningham, and I've never spoken before, so is there something else I'm supposed to be telling you? My address, my social security number.
Just name and address.
Address, 6 Nichols Drive, Hastings-on-Hudson. I actually am here to reiterate a lot of the comments that Mia just made about the change to the, I guess, the ability of a board member to also serve on another board. And I want to say that the timing does seem odd, given all the things that's happening with the board. And I also want to say that, frankly, I'd like to think that SEPTA and the PTSA are completely and 100% aligned with the people that sit on this board. We're all out here for the kids, and that's why we're here. And frankly, if I had my way, a lot of the board would be sort of required to be on a SEPTA or a PTSA board, because that's where we hear, we talk about what our kids are going through, what's happening in different classrooms, and frankly, I think it would only benefit you in the job that you're doing to have more input and more perspective of what's actually happening in the classrooms. And I just can't imagine living without Lisa's advocacy on the PTSA board, because nobody does it quite the way she does, and I'm glad that she's paying so close attention and that she's working so hard on it. I feel only not just our district, but everyone benefits from that in the state of New York. So I hope you'll reconsider making a hard and fast rule when I don't think there needs to be one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments from the board?
I think Christine's wants to get.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll do it before you do. It's Rob McQueen, 7 Glen Place. And I don't really want to say anything, because I believe emotion is not what you should have when you talk about something as important as this. And I would much prefer to keep my professional hat on and tell you that whether it's legal or not, you are setting an incredible precedent here. If you're the head of recreation, do you use the facilities of this school district?
I'm not the head of recreation.
Recreation basketball. Does recreation basketball use this facility?
Yeah.
There's a conflict of interest when you go talk to Roy and others about that.
I don't
You're
talk to
opening
Roy.
it up.
I don't talk to Roy. I think
I'm commenting.
Okay.
Please, this is so embarrassing that you can act this way. Stop. I am commenting that you're opening a precedent that says you can't be on the board either. I can't be on the board because my wife's a VP of SEPTA. You can't be on the board because your wife's an educator. Those are the people on boards across the country. It's not just illegal, it's unethical, it's immoral. You're embarrassing yourselves. Stop. That's my comment. No reaction, please.
Well, I'm going to react, Rob. No, I'm sorry.
No, wait, just...
Like more comments.
No, we're
Like
not, no,
more
it's
comments.
not appropriate.
It is.
It's not appropriate.
Hi, Christina Mitchell, 45 Hudson Street. I think a lot of what was said in the second public comment, I would absolutely concur with. I've stood here before you many, many times. Sometimes I'm the only one in the audience. And throughout this school year, I've seen, I don't know, I've seen discourse that I think Rob is alluding to that's going on right now, maybe not to this level, but I have. And I feel like a board needs to be united. I feel like a board needs to come together. And I feel like this board needs healing. And I don't know how that's going to come. And I'm not really necessarily standing here as a candidate. I'm not standing here as a co-president of SEPTA. I'm standing here as a Hastings resident, and what I have seen, I don't know. I don't know how real change and progress can occur when people are at odds with each other, and when the language that is used, when the tone and tenor is such that we're divided. And by dividing ourselves here, we divide ourselves within the school. When it comes to this policy, I would suggest A, definitely check out with the lawyers. I would also say that it should be held off until after this election. You know, there was a little bit talk before about the fields, and there was some talk about the goalposts, and I was thinking about games. And we teach children how to play games, what the rules of the games are. We don't change the rules halfway through the game. The people who decided to run for the Board of Education, those 5 people, they signed on, and the rules were the rules. And you can't just suddenly say, oh, we're going to add this. Whether it affects me or not, it's just the right thing to do. And I think we have to start doing the right thing. We have to, as Rob said, we have to be moral. We have to be guided by that. Obviously, we need to use knowledge. We need to use information. And the information Lisa provided today, to say that it was invaluable would be an understatement. Because in reading the line that was read before, on the surface, someone might say, oh yeah, I agree with it. But when you delve deeper into it and you do the work that Lisa did and has been doing, and I know you all work so hard, so I'm not saying that anyone's working harder than anybody else, but when Lisa did this, she illuminated something. She brought something to the table, her expertise, and that should be valued. The same way each one of you have an expertise that's brought to the table that should be valued. That's what a board should do. We should bring the best of ourselves, and we should come together. And I don't know, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Anybody else? Okay. Anybody on the board want to make a comment?
I just want to make a clarification. I'm not on any board that has to do with rec basketball. I was a board member of the PTSA, and when I became a Board of Ed member, I stepped down from that position. I think that everybody can and should stay involved as volunteers. I'm just talking about the position as a board member when you're both the boss of the superintendent and advocating, and I'm talking about that as a conflict of interest. But staying involved, Absolutely.
If it's okay.
Quite frankly, I would pick running rec basketball over being on the board of Board of Ed any day of the week. And any of you who have had kids involved in the program, I think you know why that is.
Rob, can I?
This is not the proposal.
Okay.
Just board comments.
You know, Rob, if you want to stay, make a comment.
That's not.
And I don't know if this is okay stuff.
Yeah.
But you're setting up a precedent is the point. And it absolutely doesn't just look like the timing's bad. The timing's bad. And you guys should know it. And for anybody to think that this wasn't going to end this way, and the discussion wasn't going to happen this way, I question your self-perception here. Come on. The town is talking about a lot of this already, and then you come up and 2 weeks, 3 weeks before an election want to change the rules. That doesn't seem bad timing. It is bad timing. My point, Jody, with all due respect, because I know everybody here does it for the right reason, and I know you've been doing it a long time with rec. I just try to bring it up as a point that the precedent you will set, legally or not, is that everybody's going to be opened up for conflict. Everybody. And I'll tell you what, I'm competing, quote unquote, against Tim. It shouldn't be. I'm so happy 5 people are going for this. I don't know why we are, actually. Right? But I love it. Right? And I don't know Tim personally, but we have mutual friends who speak incredibly highly. And I know you're partners with your wife. What are we supposed to think about that? If you want to draw the line in the sand, you have to include that. You have to include the rec, because you're using the facilities of the school run by the superintendent that you're the boss of. You have to look at everything if you open this up. Don't open it up. Legally or not, don't open it up. Because I'll tell you, I hear it. I heard it on Saturday. There's a ton of concern on the conflicts. You're going to open up Pandora's box you don't want. I heard it on Saturday myself, talking to somebody. You're going to open up a big Pandora's box. Don't open it up.
But we just said that we were going to consult with the lawyer and we were going to put it off.
You're going to look for legal. I'm requesting comment from the community. Don't bother. Don't bother is my request.
You're saying don't even bother. So
What? Who cares if it's legal or not? Don't do it.
Okay.
It's foolish.
All right. We can carry on these conversations later, but I think at this point, unless somebody else has another comment they'd like to make.
I would say, does anybody want to follow up on Rob's suggestion that it be killed now?
Well, I would make one comment. This is not a new precedent. This was the common practice. We haven't had new board members in a long time, so it's an old practice, but it was common. So it was not. This is not a new precedent. It's sort of for the current moment.
You're missing the point. Sorry. First of all, did you request that Lisa resign from her position when she was elected?
Yeah.
Okay. And she decided not to, and you didn't take it up then? It wasn't important enough then for you to change the rules and the bylaws or the whatever it is? Mm-hmm. No. You're setting a precedent is my point. I understand that. My mother was the president of the PTA before she became a board member. She resigned it at the request of the president of the board. I've known that my whole life. It devastated my mother, who was the president of the PTA Council's larger community. It devastated her. She couldn't understand it. Don't do that to people. Don't make them make a choice. Jody, you don't need a choice. You do a great job running recreation basketball. Why would you have to make a choice? You said you would make a choice, you'd choose basketball. No, you shouldn't. You're advocating for the children of this community on this board.
I don't have to make a choice, though. I don't
But I'm just
go
saying,
to the
you made that
superintendent.
statement that you would choose basketball. I'm saying to you is, don't talk about 10 years ago press and everything else. It's never been on the books before. Don't put it on the books now.
So I'll ask again, does anybody want to support what, I support what Rob is saying, that we should kill it right now. Does anybody else interested? I can make a motion and see if there's a second. I don't know what the process is, or do I just ask to see if anybody's interested? Or did you all want to move forward and see if what the attorneys say? If the attorneys say yes, then continue to move forward. I'll make it clear. Do people want to vote right now on whether to move forward with this at all or whether to end it this evening?
I'll respond this way. I am personally indifferent. I am truly, truly, truly indifferent. I do think that in certain instances, the historical precedent of voluntarily resigning makes a lot of sense and staying involved with the community. I think that people, yourself included, Christina included, operate in the right place for the right reasons. I am truly, deeply indifferent about dropping this now or going to legal and having it tabled until July. Definitively, regardless of what legal comes back with, this will not be addressed prior to after the election. Right? So those are for me two equal outcomes. I am so. I'm sorry I can't be as definitive. I think as you'd like a motion to just table it now. But if others feel strongly about tabling it, I am completely indifferent on this.
Does anybody
Lisa,
else
I would
want to
rather
say-
wait till Gab is here to be a part of the discussion.
Does anybody else want to wait then? Is everybody else happy with it moving forward then? If we're not, the question on the table right now is anybody, I'm happy to make the motion, but I won't.
I'll say something. I didn't know this conversation was even coming. And it feels like it turned into a very deep conversation that was a lot more loaded than I realized it would be. And I know everyone in the audience, except for you, Ann. I don't know you, but it's nice to meet you. And you, but you haven't spoken, but it's nice to meet you as well. Thank you for coming. And, I can, just having sat down and met them in different social settings, I can attest to, and you as well, Lisa, the moral fiber and the character of you as people. I think when you write policy, you're trying, and I'm not talking about the whole idea that it was introduced in the last couple of weeks and the perceived impropriety of that. I mean, that's a different issue. I'm going to put that over here on a shelf. I'm talking just about policy, and I'm also not talking about the specific wording of the way that it was worded, using specific names of organizations. That's potentially a problem as well. I will go back to the idea of there can be at some point a person who is on the board, who comes from an organization, who is requesting things of a financial nature that can be potentially conflicted. And the thing I don't understand is it have to be a board member of an organization that comes to make a request of a superintendent? Can it be someone else who comes and advocates so loudly, so strongly that there still is a conflict? So in some ways, maybe the whole thing's a moot point. Because if I'm a very vocal, strong person, but I don't have the title, I might show up on the superintendent's doorstep anyways and be a real pain in the butt. And, the reality is maybe we're just splitting hairs with this argument. I don't know. But I feel like I got pushed into some conversation here. And Lisa, I actually don't appreciate right now you saying, do you want to kill it right now? I feel like there's a very charged conversation in the room, and I'd like some time to stop and think about what did I walk into. Emotions seem to escalate very fast, very high here. I thought this issue was about something else until the latter half of this, to be honest with you. The board saw an email go around that the rest of the public didn't see about a specific topic, that I thought that's what this was about. Turns out it was about something else entirely. So I feel like I'm trying to figure out what's going on in this conversation right now. And I appreciate everything you've all said. And I do find that it is, Rob, what you bring up, very valid, very valid points. People who are going for these positions are committed people in a district who are doing it for the kids and for the heart of it all. And all that notwithstanding, someone can show up with potentially down the road a set of motives that are asking for something where a conflict could come up. And Eileen, and I know Eileen and Donna for 9-10 months now, and I don't think that was the intention to raise this right now in that certain way, but certainly smells funny, right? I mean, there's no way around that fact. So this is like a way bigger issue than I thought it was when the whole thing started. It's like crazy. I thought this was some small conversation that got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I guess all I'm saying is, Lisa, is like, I don't really want to kill it right now because I don't even know what I'm killing exactly.
Well, I just wanted to follow up when Rob was saying, you know, don't take this next step, and I hear what he's saying. But
yeah,
we'll take the next
and
step.
look, it all may be right, but it's like, I feel like there's so many agendas in this room, I'm not even sure what I'm killing at this point. So I just think it's probably worth all of us sleeping on it, getting an attorney to look at it, coming back with some fresh eyes, and making a decision.
I will make one final comment. That Christina, your point is spot on. Full stop.
All right, then. I think that'll round it up for tonight.
Wait, I'm sorry, are we having an executive session? As per your email?
Yep, for the public portion of the meeting.
But
I
don't we
need...
have to make the motion during the public portion of the meeting?
Yes, we do. So why don't I ask for a motion? I'd like to make... Well, I have to say what it's for.
We have to identify the purpose of the meeting.
Can I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment history of a particular person?
Wait,
What?
I thought that wasn't the purpose, the employment history of a person?
That's
That, okay, can I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment history of a particular person?
So moved.
And a second.
second.
And I will talk to you about it later, but I've checked with the attorneys, and that is the language I'm supposed to be using, so please.
The attorneys are good with it, fine.
All right, and then, so we'll adjourn.